Welcome to the Haunted Hangover podcast. I'm Louie, and I'm joined by Grimey.
This is becoming a very regular thing, I'm noticing.
Grimey, what's going on? Why are you always here now?
Y'all sick of me yet?
I don't think so. Listen, man. People that listen to your show, they're coming this way, and I'm sure vice versa. So there you go. It's a good thing for all of us, Grimey. I love having you on. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate that. that. And I hope people do like me being here because it sounds like I'm going to be here for a while with what we got going on now.
Yes. You know what? And I think so because I've been getting some great feedback on our Carmela Creeper video. Lots of people have been enjoying that one. I wasn't sure with some of the words I was using that people would be offended by my description of Carmela Creeper in that episode. So
if they're anything like us, they think exactly the same way.
Yes. Moist and delicious.
It's good, man. Carmela Creeper, she's a babe.
She's not a vampire, which is a poor segue to what we're going to be talking about here. But before I do that, this is an idea I've had. Most our listeners or listeners of the show know what we're talking about because it's the title. But this has been a concept I've been toying with for a while. If you subscribe to our Patreon, to the Haunted Hangover Patreon, I think a few months ago I mentioned doing this or kind of it being an experiment, a challenge to myself, because this is a big commitment. It's a lot of goddamn movies in this franchise, or I guess franchise is what you would call it.
Franchise, for sure.
Franchise of films. Mm-hmm. And that's the Universal Monsters, the classic Universal Monsters, because there are some newer Universal Monsters that technically fall into that, but we're going with the old school shit. Nothing past, I believe it's like 1960, I think.
1950.
Is the late 50s?
58,
yes.
Something like that. Now, real quick, did you ever watch all of them before? Like, did you just pick and choose a couple here and there, or what?
So, I've seen, I'd say about maybe like 25 of them, 20 of them. Yeah, I've seen a lot of them. I've seen a good chunk. I'm familiar with a lot of them. Nice. Where I kind of got caught slipping, was I didn't watch a lot of the sequels. So there's certain characters that I never saw any, like the Invisible Man, for example. I think I've maybe seen one of the sequels. When I think there's like 4 or something like that, or 5 even. Okay. Creature from the Black Lagoon, I think I've only seen maybe 2 of them. So like the original and then one of the sequels. So then there's some I've seen all the sequels, like Frankenstein. I've seen all of them. The Dracula movie, the Wolfman movies, I've seen all of them, even though there's not that many. Dracula, I've seen maybe 2 or 3 of them. So I'm kind of spread throughout. Like, it's kind of weird. And then there's some that people forget are Universal Monster movies because they technically don't have like an iconic monster in it. Like when you think of Universal Monsters, you think of Frankenstein, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon. You know, there's some that people
like Hunchback.
Yes, technically.
Phantom of the Opera.
And this list we're going by, which I'm not even gonna get into which one we picked, because this is gonna be kind of our own journey in what films we choose to watch. But we're going by a list. It's a rough list, I guess. That we're kind of following. There's some movies that aren't on it because technically some of them were part of the silent era, like the original Phantom of the Opera.
Right.
With, I believe it's Lon Chaney, not Junior, Senior. The original Lon Chaney. And some people consider that a Universal Monster, and then some don't, because I believe it was like it's the silent film era. So it was like the studios were very different, even though I believe that was shot at Universal Studios. And I think that studio burnt down or was turned into something else, if I remember correctly. So we're kind of going by the sound era. Everything has audio and you can hear the characters. There's no... I love silent films. So I'm not shitting on silent films. Maybe eventually get to some of those, but... you
absolutely.
Know... Now, I think you'd agree. And you know what? Before I move any forward, Grimey, have you seen any of these movies?
I have seen I think 4. So
Wow.
I've seen Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, Dracula. I've seen The Invisible Man, Creature. I think that's it. And right away, before getting into this, I was thinking how awesome it would be for my street cred had I watched all of them. So this is, it's something I've wanted to knock off on the bucket list here, and it's an easy one to do. You just sit and watch a bunch of movies, and I like that I have the luxury to sit here and bullshit about them afterwards. So
Watch them and talk shit.
Hell yeah.
I always associate the Universal Monsters with Halloween to me, and I think you agree with me as well. We've talked about it before.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they kind of go hand in hand. Halloween, Universal Monsters. Even to me, I think even more so than like Michael Myers, the Halloween franchise. I feel like the Universal Monsters just meld better with the Halloween season. I feel like nothing beats taking a night in October and watching like one of these movies, watching Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, The Wolfman. Wolfman's a great Halloween movie, even though it doesn't take place on Halloween or have anything to do with the holiday. But there's something about it to me. And as we go through these films, episode by episode, we'll be, Halloween will be coming up in kind of those feels that some movies might give you more than others.
Oh yeah, totally. And I mean, we can blame the Halloween influence probably from Pepsi and Frito-Lay,
yes.
Really. They did the whole boom in the 90s, and that's mostly what I'm familiar with when it comes to the Universal Monsters and their awesome classic commercials and all their signage and stuff. But this is completely different from the movies.
Yeah, it's funny. I think that's how most people, when they think of the Universal Monsters, they kind of they never jump into the movies. They just know the characters. They never take a crack. You know how many people I know have never seen like Dracula, which is what the film we're talking about in this episode. There you go. But loved the character and loved the aesthetic, loved seeing him on we recently talked about your Pizza Hut box. They're all on that.
Absolutely.
And that era of Universal Monsters is the one that resonates with me as well, because I remember as a kid seeing, the re-releases of them on VHS, seeing them, being used to market junk food and other things and toys.
Sure.
Burger King, I think, had toys, if I remember correctly, which I think I own all of them.
They did.
They're somewhere here.
What I think is funny, you mentioned that not a lot of people have seen all these movies, and I mean, that's fact. But like every 90s sitcom, anytime they're watching a horror movie or a spooky movie or they're watching movies during Halloween, it's always a fucking black and white movie from Universal Monsters.
Yeah, it's either that or Night of the Living Dead, because that's public domain.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, totally.
It's one or the other. But yeah, if it's a movie, like if it's a Universal produced film, they have the rights to all these characters. So in a lot of those horror movies, they're watching like The Wolfman or something like that. So it is, again, the holiday and the characters just go hand in hand. And that's why I've wanted to do this. That's why I feel like I love them. The movies I have seen that I'm quite familiar with, and the one we're talking about today, I'm quite familiar with. I've seen it at least 12 times in my life. This movie, I would say parts of it are very Halloween-y. And there's other films, like I said before, that kind of give you those vibes more than others, because there's some that are more science fiction, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's weird. It's gonna be a journey. It'll be fun to revisit these, and I can't wait to hit some that I haven't seen. I can't.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited for that.
There's one big one I can tell you right now off the top of my head, and I believe it's on the list. Hopefully I'm right, not wrong. The Mole People. I've never seen that movie.
Well, that's a good pick there.
I'm pretty sure that's on the list of it's a Universal monster, but you don't ever hear anyone talk about the Mole People.
So, it's a deep cut, man. It's like just like we were saying about Hunchback and Phantom of the Opera. Nobody thinks of them as monsters. They're just like random people. But yeah, totally.
And when we get to certain movies, there'll be other references we make to other shit, and like people know this character more than the actual film itself, and even that version that Universal produced. There's a couple of it's weird. But when we get to those movies, we'll dive deeper into that subject. But we're going to start with what I would consider, and Grammy, I'm curious if you agree with me or not, Dracula is the grandfather of the Universal Monsters. Would you agree? He's the grandfather.
Oh, yeah. Not only the grandfather of Universal Monsters, but he's also like, if this movie didn't exist, how different would the, United States of America, the whole, like, U.S. horror in general, like, how different would it have been if this didn't exist? And it's just that powerful of a film.
Imagine if this movie was not a success. We wouldn't have gotten 50 other movies after this that Universal produced. But yes, let's dive into 1931's Dracula.
But no, this is no dream. This is Dracula, the original terrifying story of a maniac and a man who lived after death, lived on human blood, took the form of a vampire bat, and lured innocent girls to a fate truly worse than death.
So Dracula was released on February 14th, 1931, Valentine's Day.
Wow.
Very sexy, very romantic.
Yeah, it is romantic.
I don't know if that was done on purpose, but it is quite fitting when you think about it.
It's different, but yeah, I'll allow it. I'm here for it.
Listen, when we dive into the movie, Dracula, he's trying to bag himself a lady in this one. Ladies, absolutely. In all honesty, he's bagging all the ladies.
Going for the fourth wife.
Yes, the fourth wife. Damn, Dracula, he's got it going on. But yes, it was directed by Todd Browning, who also directed another one of my favorite movies, not a Universal film, Freaks. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, Grimey, but
nah.
Another great movie that I would love to cover one day on Haunted Hangover. It's just, it's about literally circus freaks and
nice.
how they're mistreated. And then they kind of snap because there's these terrible humans. But that'll be for another day. It's based on the 1924 stage play, which I did not know that. This is not based on the 1890. Well, obviously it's inspired by the original Bram Stoker novel from 1897, but it takes more attributes and plot points from the stage play.
I did read that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I think that's pretty cool that it's like there was a novel, and I get and the original Bram Stoker Dracula novel, it reads like a journal. It's a very dense read.
I'm sure. And I hate reading, so like I'm never going to read it. So I have no idea how well this adaptation, whatever you want to call it, holds up. I did read that they wanted Lon Chaney to play Dracula at first, and then so Lon Chaney Sr., he passed away from cancer. Then Bela Lugosi, he was on Broadway for these shows, right? And then they pulled him from them?
Yeah, he portrayed Dracula in the stage play. Yeah. And since his performance was so good, and when you watch this movie, it is great. You see why they wanted him. He ended up just kind of taking over the role and playing the lead, Count Dracula. And speaking of which, you mentioned Bela Lugosi. He plays Count Dracula. We've got Dwight Fry, who portrays another character that I feel has become quite popular, Renfield. Got his own movie last year, which was okay.
It was okay. So I watched it, but I fell asleep, so like I didn't really finish it.
So there you go. You save yourself 90 minutes or whatever of your time. You're better off taking a nap probably than finishing that one. That's just my opinion. But the Renfield character is pretty popular in general. And when you watch this movie, you kind of see why. He's basically the kind of second antagonist of the film, sort of. He's kind of just a psycho. We've also got Edward von Sloan as Van Helsing. He's another standout in this movie. Just everyone in this movie has such a particular look. It's obviously of the time, being 1931. Like, there's something about these movies that people just looked and carried themselves so differently. It's odd looking at it now, like 100 years later. You know what I mean? Like, crazy.
Yeah, definitely crazy.
And we've got Helen Chandler. She's the last one on my list because there's a ton of people in this movie, but she plays Mina. She's the main love interest, I guess you could say,
Right.
Dracula's obsession in the
Countess.
film. Yeah, that's what she wants. He wants her to be his countess, but
Yeah.
things don't go too good for good old Count Dracula there at the end. But I've got a brief synopsis here. I'm sure most of the listeners know the plot of Dracula. I'm beating a dead horse here, but in the off chance that you've never seen this movie, I'll break it down for you here. So the movie follows Count Dracula, who, with the help of a hypnotized Renfield, migrates from Transylvania to England. There, he becomes infatuated with two women who are friends, which I, for some reason, always forget that they're friends. For some reason, I always thought they were sisters, but they're friends.
They kind of look like sisters, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I for so long, until I was like really sitting there I've watched it twice in the last couple weeks. I was like, they're friends, not sisters. They're just friends. But yes, their names are Lucy and Mina. After turning Lucy into a vampire, Dracula's attention then goes to Mina. As her health declines and her behavior gets all strange because she's being turned into a vampire, Mina's father and her fiance, called Professor Van Helsing, which another character everyone is familiar with, who informs the men that Dracula is a vampire himself and that the men should kill him in order to save Mina's life. And that's Dracula. That's the main plot of Dracula.
Legitimately,
Now,
that's it.
That's literally what the movie's about.
That's it.
This movie is an hour and 10 minutes long. It's very short. It's a quick watch. Grimey. Now, before we go to some of my favorite things and some stuff you loved about the movie, or maybe you didn't like about the movie, we'll start with some likes first, some stuff we enjoyed about the film. Before we get into anything we didn't like, what was it like watching this for the first time, since you had never seen it before?
I went into it pretty excited. I know you wanted to start with likes, but I'm going to start with my dislike is that it's.
Oh no,
Man, it is a hard watch your first time around. I actually had to watch it twice because the first time I was like not paying attention enough to it. The second time I was at work and I was just like doing my own thing. It was a Sunday and I was able to just kind of sit there and have my phone out and with a speaker playing. But yeah, it's a tough one to get through. It's very very dry.
It's quiet.
And
it's a quiet
it is
movie.
quiet. Yeah, that's one thing that I wish. I know that there's like a 4K version out there now, and they use the 1988, 1989 score from Philip Glass, I believe his name is, which might have been better for me. I would have benefited from that watch a little bit more, but the silence. And here's a like. The silence kind of adds some like eerie creepiness to a lot of the really really awesome stills that they have there, like the still frame shots that they have, and this movie is like chock full of a ton of those, and so just some like really iconic moments.
Yeah, and I'll say this when it comes to, and this is something I love about the movie, it's one of my favorite things about the movie, and I think I can get where you got a little bored with it, because I think the setup of the movie, fantastic, with Renfield going to Count Dracula's castle and then being warned by the townspeople, the people of the mountains. That's what they call themselves.
Yes,
even though it looked very flat where they were. There was nothing mountainous about it. And they give it's true. Like when you leave like a town, I was like, you guys are not like, maybe they're on a mountain. Dracula's castle looks like it's on a mountain, not their village. Whatever. They give him the cross, just, him and the horse and carriage, everything about that setup. And the visual of Dracula's castle being so it's basically like pure, like gothic horror. That's the best way. It's dark, it's decrepit, full of cobwebs, howling wolves, fog. They use a miniature, you can tell, for the exterior of the actual castle, which I love. And I think what happens is, to defend your boredom, to give you some so that you understand, that I understand where you're coming from, I guess, and I totally get, because I do love this movie. After he leaves Transylvania, it does dip.
Yeah,
I think after that initial kind of visit from Renfield and then him on the boat and him getting to England, that's where it's like, all right, where is this going? Because you start meeting Mina and her fiance and her dad and Lucy, and you're just like, then they're at a show and Dracula just kind of shows up, and it's all just him falling in love with these women. And it kind of dips away from the gothic horror element.
Yeah. Yep.
I'd say. But we're also looking at it from the perspective of 2023.
Yes. And that sure, right there.
Yeah.
Is like the issue. I feel like for me is like I'm so desensitized to a lot of the stuff that we watch now, and it's very important if you're gonna watch a film like this to go in the mind frame of like, this is from fucking 1931.
Yeah,
their horror is, I mean, this is the first of the first, basically, you know what I mean? So like there's that, and like what scared people then most certainly isn't going to scare people now. It's the same with comedy. What's funny then isn't necessarily funny now, and vice versa. Like,
we evolve.
It is
people.
What it is. Like, yeah, absolutely.
What's freaky now, I guess, and I don't even know what's freaky now. I feel like people are so desensitized compared to something as simple as, you know, a hand reaching out of a coffin. I'm sure people were probably fucking screaming in the theaters, you know. Yeah, I don't know if they said, "Oh shit," that would have been amazing. Right. Oh shit, it's Dracula. But you know, I feel like I see where you're coming from, where it gets kind of boring. I'm not bored, but I also think I went into it. I go into it. I wouldn't call it the best Universal monster movie. It's not.
Right. Yeah.
There are better films. Yep. But I feel like there's just certain things about it that it does right. And I think that opening scene is so powerful that when he leaves it, when that goes away and doesn't come back until the end of the movie, it gets a little dry, like you said. It's kind of like just him creeping around. I will say two more things that I love about the opening of it, and I'm gonna honestly, that's gonna be something I talk a lot about because it's one of my favorite aspects of the film itself. It's kind of funny, and I don't think this was done on, you know, they're not trying to be funny or comedic, but this goes back to it being 1931. I love how the horse and carriage like is kind of bouncing around. Like you can tell there's like no, like they're not moving. It's just like, bouncing around. And then there's that one scene where Renfield leaves the horse and carriage and the dude just dumps his like shit, his luggage and stuff. Like I don't think that was supposed to be funny, but it just looks comedic because of how abrupt it is, just out of nowhere. Where the guy's supposed to be playing it up like, this is an evil place, Renfield. Why are you going here? Here's your shit. I'm leaving. I'm gonna dip. And it just comes off as comedic. Same thing with the townspeople. They're kind of hamming it up as well. You know, warning Renfield, but I still love it so much. Like I still love that entire setup. I just think it's perfect. I think it's chef's kiss, you know. And then even the shots of them kind of like Dracula, his brides rising from the coffins.
Oh yeah.
Weird random armadillos.
I was gonna say, I thought the armadillos was kind of weird. It was like they just, whatever fucking animal they could get on their hands, they were just like, yeah, we'll throw armadillos in there.
Yeah, I would love to look into why that's what they chose to use, not rats.
So they wanted to use rats. They wanted to, but the audience, they were saying that the audience did not react to rats kindly, I guess. And that they were too afraid of them. Like it was pushing the boundaries of horror at that point in time.
Wow, pushing the boundaries. A rat.
Yeah.
So an armadillo is a substitute for.
Apparently, yeah, man. Vampires and armadillos go hand in hand.
It's the last animal I think of when I think of a vampire. When I think of Dracula, armadillos do not come to mind at all.
So maybe an anteater or something. I don't know.
Yeah. That'd be more terrifying. There's nothing scary about an armadillo, but whatever. I will say this, and I'm sure this is something you'd agree with me on when it comes to just something that is iconic, and you probably know what I'm going to say, and I think we'll have a lot to say about this. Bela Lugosi as Count Dracula carries the movie to the point that when he's not on screen, the movie, it feels like it's missing something. He's the main attraction of this. It's obviously called Dracula, so
Right.
you know.
We know how to save Miss Mina's soul, if not her life. If she dies by day, but I shall see that she dies by night. And I will have Carfax Abbey torn down stone by stone, excavated a mile around. I will find your earth box and drive that stake through your heart.
Well, between him and Fry, the guy that plays
Dwight Fry,
yeah. If either one of them are missing, it's hard for me to pay attention, I guess. Like, I did, obviously, but it's better when both of them or one of them, either one interchangeably, is on, just because there's a certain energy there that, like, has me focused on it. Obviously, with Renfield, his cynicism, it's like way over the top and almost comedic. Like, it is funny at times where he's like, they open the boat and he's just down there,
Yeah.
like, what the fuck? But it works really well for his character, and it's entertaining, to say the least.
The best thing about Renfield and Dwight Fry's performance is that he'll go from like cool and collective to chaotic in like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
He'll be like, "Oh, I'm calm," and I'm like, "You know,
Yeah,
leave
totally.
me alone." Like it's so like his desperation, just kind of because he'll go from like trying to warn them about his master,
Yeah.
to freaking out about the master, like Dracula coming back. Or them finding out information, even though he's the reason that everything goes south for Dracula in the movie. But I will say there's that one scene where he's begging Dracula, and I know we kind of jumped off of Dracula and went to Renfield, but he's begging Dracula to like kill him, and it's a great scene. Like, it's such a great performance, and Dwight Fry pops back up in other Universal monster movies. Like, he comes back. And that actor, man, he has such a specific look. Like, there's just, again, it goes back to what I said earlier about people of the time. Like, the two of them, just the performance, and even Bela Lugosi, there's just something, they're very charismatic with these kind of, you would say they're kind of cookie cutter performances, because it's like just craziness and then really like calm. Like, Dracula's kind of sexy and cool, and then Renfield's kind of crazy. There's not much to it, but they take that and they elevate it a ton. You know what I mean? And make
absolutely.
They outshine everyone, basically.
Yeah,
everyone is outshined in the movie. Even the actor that plays Van Helsing, Edward Von Sloan, he's good in this, but he's not Dwight Fry or Bela Lugosi. You know what I mean?
No. Yep.
And one more thing I want to say about this, and I think it's probably one of the more important things when it comes to the original 1931 Dracula, is this Dracula is the blueprint for every single vampire or portrayal of Dracula that exists. Like Halloween costumes, you know, the idea of whenever you see like a Dracula decoration, it's the suit with the pop collar cape thing. You know, the widow's peak, even though he didn't have a widow's peak, in his actual look, there's no widow's peak.
Right.
But you know, he's got, you know, the eyes, the hand. He does the whole like kind of hand thing when he's trying to like hypnotize them. Everything about this performance is iconic. That's the only word I could really use when it comes to just the character of Dracula. And when we think of Dracula, this is what we think of. You know, this is what comes to mind.
Absolutely. Even something as simple as a real Ghostbusters figure, like that leached out into just every recognizable vampiric thing you can think of. This character, there's some bit of him in each one. And that's one thing that I did love about this movie is, like, obviously I've seen like The Lost Boys, I've seen you know, every other vampire movie and Dracula. Yeah, all these other ones, and it's really kind of an eye-opener to see what bits and pieces of this film stuck in all these other films. And it was like, oh, you know, every other scene, I'm like, that they used this in Fright Night, and they used this in whatever other movie. And it's just kind of cool to see that come to fruition. Like, with the wine in the beginning there, you see that kind of concept hit in The Lost Boys right towards when Michael's taking his first swig of wine. Like, it's just kind of cool how they took bits and pieces.
Yeah, the whole thing with Dracula, I never drink wine, right? Isn't that what he says? I think he's like, I never drink wine. He's got a lot of like really memorable lines too in this. One of my favorite lines he has in this is he goes, "Listen to them, children of the night, what music they make." Like that's a line I think everyone. I've heard that in the beginning of like songs have used it and stuff like that because it's such a memorable. Like if you're like a goth kid, that's your line. Children of the night, what music they make. Like that's every goth kid worships Dracula and vampire culture and shit like that. You know what I did find interesting, and I was thinking about it while I was watching this movie. Two things stood out to me. The top hat. You never see a portrayal of Dracula wearing a top hat, and in this movie, you see he's only wearing it like in one or two scenes. But it's a top hat. You never see any like images of like a Dracula costume or a traditional Dracula costume with a fucking top hat. The second thing, I don't know if you noticed this or not, no fangs.
No fangs. Yeah, I did notice that. Yeah,
Crazy.
And I'm not certain. You can call me out on this one if you prefer to, but I don't think he hissed at all. Was there any hissing involved? I didn't think.
No hissing.
Yeah, so there's like some very prominent Dracula-esque aspects that you would think would be in this film, but weren't. And I thought that was pretty strange. The fangs are the
biggest one to me.
Oh yeah,
I always forget.
Even the Widow's Peak thing. Like I assumed, when you like you said, like when you think of Dracula or you think of a vampire, you're like, yeah, well, the Widow's Peak, but like not there. So weird.
What I would love to know, and I don't even know this information, what started the fanged vampire craze? It must have been a sequel. What I think happens when it comes to the look of Dracula and them all being based on Bela Lugosi's portrayal is it's exaggerated. Like, I think throughout the years it's been exaggerated. That's like where the Widow's Peak comes from. The fangs, that charm. Whenever you see a Dracula costume, it's like a charm.
Oh, yeah.
Or he doesn't wear that, but whenever you see a Dracula costume, that's usually there. So it is an interesting kind of realization that you see that this is a really kind of simple performance as Dracula. Well, one of the most, to me, the thing that this Dracula or this version of Bela Lugosi's original Dracula is all the like eyes, the wide-eyed look.
Oh yeah.
He never blinks with the lighting across his eyes and everything else is dark. I love those shots, dude. He looks so fucking sinister.
Oh yeah, very menacing. Yeah, anytime he's like talking to these people telepathically or whatever he's doing, it's just like it's a focused shot, still shot on his eyes, and the lighting. It is very weird, like the lighting, how it's just like one rectangular light that's like on his eyes. It's eerie, man. It's kind of creepy, and it's effective.
I could see people in 1931 screaming at those shots of
like,
just
oh, shit.
Dracula, like him just staring with his eyes lit up, and that's like it just it's an intimidating performance. Like this does not look like a pushover Dracula. He even shares that one scene with Van Helsing where, and I love it. It's like they're pressing each other, where Van Helsing is standing there, Dracula's trying to hypnotize him. It's a great scene. It's probably one of my favorite scenes in it. And he's trying to hypnotize Van Helsing, and Dracula realizes it's working, and then Van Helsing kind of snaps out of it and takes a step back. And he tells him, like, you're a lot stronger than you look.
Your will's strong.
Yeah, and then Van Helsing kind of pulls out he kind of steps forward and then pulls out a cross and like presses him with that, or know. So I do love that. There's just like when you talk about the movie, you realize how important of a Dracula movie it is. Like even now talking about it, you're like, you know what? It is vital. Everything we know about the vampire film comes from this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there isn't a lot of energy on screen, that's for sure. And like the energy that you do get it's very still, but also very like menacing and cynical, I guess. But it's entertaining, to say the least.
For sure. And he has there's one more thing that always stood out to me about this movie, and I love it because it's almost like I try to figure out if it's comedy. Looking back at 1931, there's a line where Dracula, he when he moves to England from Transylvania, he buys this castle called Carfax Abbey. Yeah. And it's like run down and stuff like that. And they ask him, or one of the other characters, it might be like Mina's father or fiance or something, goes, "Oh, are you going to fix it up? Like it could use a fixer-upper." And Dracula says, he's like, "Oh no, I like it that way. It reminds me of my castle back home," or something. It's such a like he's very just so good. And I'm like, is that a joke? It comes off as a joke. Like, I like it all kind of, decrepit.
Yeah, there are certain points in the film where it's hard to tell if they meant to be funny or what. There's only one real, in my opinion, comedic relief in the film, and that's that he's like the worker in the hospital.
The orderly,
that's kind of
the orderly and
yeah. Yeah, he's kind of a goofy bastard. I really like his character.
Yeah, he's the one that's always having to go fetch Renfield every time he gets... Renfield's forever getting loose, basically. He's escaping his cell every, 10 minutes. They just have to... we got to take him back to his cell so he can eat bugs. And it's a great... I think there's even a point... if I remember correctly, there's a scene where the orderly, that guy, is talking to the maid, and he just tells her that he thinks everyone's losing their mind. Everyone's crazy, basically, in this house. So, yeah, that's probably the... comedic relief when it comes to the movie.
In that spot, he's like, "I even second guess you sometimes," to the maid or whatever. Really funny.
Like they have their own little side story that they're kind of going through. They're the audience. That's what I took that performance as. Like they're us, basically. Yep. Oh, what are these psychos doing? Like, because they don't believe in vampires. They don't think Renfield's supernatural. They don't know anything. They're just they're like the day-to-day guy. They're just doing their job and trying to go home and have their own personal lives. All right. So we talked about some stuff we liked for the most part, except for you, Grimey. Grimey went into some
beating it to death right in the beginning.
Grimey, you went into some stuff you didn't like. One thing that I'll say... it's not, I don't hate it, but it's kind of anticlimactic and abrupt is the ending of the movie. So what ends up happening,
super abrupt.
It's and I think that's just, again, a product of 1931 and of the time. So what ends up happening at the end of the movie is Van Helsing and Mina's fiance, they stumble across Renfield because at this point, Dracula, he took Mina and he's bringing her back to his lair in the castle at Carfax Abbey. And what ends up happening is they see him Renfield stumbling, and they're following him closely and hiding. They find it leads to the basement of Carfax Abbey, and Dracula kind of quickly kills Renfield. And then what ends up happening is the fiance goes to find Mina, and then Van Helsing just stakes. He finds Dracula's his dirt is because that's another thing that you hear in vampire lore. They have to bring their dirt from their home and sleep in it. That's where the whole coffin thing comes from. Right. But yeah, he just stakes him. It's off screen. You don't see it. All you hear is a scream from Dracula. And then Van Helsing just kind of Mina's back to normal. And then you just see Van Helsing and the fiance and Mina just all right, he's dead. Dracula's dead. We can move on.
It. It's just are you coming with us then? He's like, nah, you go ahead. I'm going to watch Dracula die. I'm like, what the fuck? That's it?
Yeah, it's weird because you would expect, they hype up Dracula so much in this movie. It's such a great, we gushed about it for 20 minutes. The performance, his aura, everything about him. And then he's just not much of a fight. He just goes into his fight. He goes into his coffin and then is staked, dies. Doesn't even grab Van Helsing by the throat, one last ditch attempt to kill him before being killed himself. Nothing. Just dies.
That would have been a great way to elevate the film too. If there was at least a little struggle. It was just well, I'm going to go to bed and serve myself to these assholes. And that's literally what happened. Like, oh my God, missed opportunity. But again, I mean, what are you going to do? It is what it is.
Is there anything else you didn't like about the movie besides the slow pace?
Okay. So there was, yeah, obviously the slow pace. I felt like some of the spots were kind of drug out. One thing I think could have been pretty cool is if we could have seen some more like transition scenes, kind of like, well, I know Dracula, he obviously turns into bats. He at one point turns into a wolf. What was stopping them from showing more of that actually happening? I guess. I mean, I know that the cinematography or whatever you want to call it, camera work, it's just not there in the 1930s. But like, I feel like they could have done something to kind of show that things are happening a little bit better.
I feel like the only special effect they have in the movie, well, two, is the little smoke pillows that are kind of like ambers on the ground, and then the bat. The bat's it's a fake bat that they're trying to shoo away whenever Dracula transforms. Yeah, you never actually see. It's kind of like Bela Lugosi walks out of frame, and then you see the animal. That's it.
Yeah. Yep.
That's basically what happens.
I'm not gonna lie. I really love the bat. Something. It's just so like cheesy and funny.
Hokey.
I just feel like but it like really adds to the aesthetic for some reason. Like seeing all this really super like uber gothic stuff, and then it's just like this flimsy little bat. Just like, there he is.
The shot of the fiance kind of trying to shoo it away, like when he goes out to the balcony to talk to Mina, and the bat's just flying, and he's like trying to like. It does when you like watch it, you're just like, this is so dumb looking, but hey man, it worked. I watched this movie 2 times. I just want to point this out too. So I watched it on Blu-ray. I've got the Universal Monsters. A lot of the movies, the way I'm gonna watch them, as they're covered here, as we cover them, is gonna be mostly through that box set because that has a good chunk of them. But I also watched it on VHS the second time. I watched this VHS. This was the 90s re-release that I'm sure you're familiar with. Most people are familiar with these tapes, you know, with that logo there that we all know and love, the Universal Monsters logo with the moon and all the characters around it. I will say, watching it on VHS, there's something special about it. It's a different vibe. I watched the like HD Blu-ray that looked great. And then in my second viewing, I said, you know what, I'm going to pop in this tape. Popped it in, and it was great. I almost enjoyed watching it on VHS more. And I mean that in the least pretentious way possible.
Right. No, I get it totally. Like when I was looking it up and it said something about a 4K re-release and this and that, and I was like, man, fuck that. I want to go backwards. I want the VHS.
Yeah, I'd recommend watching it on like if you can. I know not everyone is like us and has a VHS collection and a VCR. But I'd recommend, like, it changes sort of the atmosphere of the movie. Like, this is a great, restoration of the film as well, even though this came out, I think, in 91 or 92. This was, like, early 90s. But there's just a certain vibe it lets off when you watch it on VHS.
Nice graininess to it.
Yeah, it's very good. Like the only thing I'm missing is watching it like on a small tube TV. Unfortunately, my VHS player, my VCR is connected to my like HD TV, so it's it's not this small tube television. But what are your closing thoughts, Grimey? First time watching Dracula.
Well, real quick before we get to that, there is. I know I talked a little bit about the score not being there and that there is another version where they have some music over top of it. What it lacked in a score, it gained in sound effects, right? So, like, I wrote it down in my notes. I feel like it's kind of like watching one of those spooky sounds for Halloween CDs in real time, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I could see that.
So, like, that was appreciated, too. I loved all the sound effects. And that kind of ties in with everything that I feel at the end here. It's an eye opener, man. Like it really is an eye opener. You should watch these and at least give them a chance, even if you're not like a huge fan. You can relive your your dreams of being one of those 90s teenage sitcom people and, watch a quintessential horror movie, a black and white one at that. It is good. Don't get me wrong. Like, I do enjoy this. I did enjoy my second watch through. As slow as I did think it was, it's an important film. It's very iconic. A lot of the stills and stuff I really, really loved, and I don't know, the lore makes more sense to me now that I've watched it, I guess.
Now you understand, like, where every version of Dracula you've seen in history and every vampire film, like you said, now you
exactly.
know, the only other movie I could think that kind of also influenced it was Nosferatu, obviously.
Yeah, totally.
But that's for another day. I'll close out by saying this. It's not the best Universal monster movie. I said that earlier. It's not the worst, and I know that for a fact,
definitely.
because there's some other entries that are stinkers. But I think Bela Lugosi will always be the best Dracula, and this movie proves it. He is, at the end of the day, when you say the word Dracula, this is what you think of. That is who you think of. And I think, regardless of what you think of the movie, boring, fantastic, a slog, scary, whatever, you have to agree that Bela Lugosi's performance as this character just owns everything that comes with Dracula. Like, this is the quintessential Dracula, like the most important version.
Oh, yeah. He's top tier. They didn't put him on a Count Chocula box for nothing. Seriously. Come on. He's definitely spot on, man. I really enjoyed his portrayal of it. It's hard to believe how many other people portrayed this character. Like, we couldn't have just froze him and kept him for life.
Yeah, just froze Bela Lugosi. Yeah, man. He has an interesting career. If you ever want to take a deep dive, just read about Bela Lugosi and just kind of where he went in life and just his career. It's kind of depressing, but also just interesting. I don't know if you've ever seen Ed Wood. I always tell people, watch the Tim Burton film from Johnny Depp plays Ed Wood. And I think it's I forget the actor's name. I know his name, but Martin Landau. Martin Landau portrays Bela Lugosi in the film, and he basically brings Bela Lugosi back from the dead. Like, he does a fantastic. I think he might have won or was nominated for an Oscar for that performance. And that movie, I know we're going off on a little tangent here, but that movie, Ed Wood, basically it's the end of Bela Lugosi's life, and how important he was to horror, and just the character of Dracula. Like, he is that. He thought he was that character. That's how important it was to him. And when you watch the movie, even though I'm sure it's exaggerated because it's loosely based on what really happened, you could kind of just see that it was not only is Dracula important to all of us, but it was just as important to him.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.
So that was 1931's Dracula. Next up, we'll be talking about the Spanish language version that was released the same year. Didn't even get into that because that's technically a whole separate movie. So keep an eye out for that one. Grimey.
Absolutely.
Thank you for doing this with me. We've got plenty of other films to go.
Oh yeah, we're in for the long haul. I can't wait to hit all of them. This is going to be an adventure.
It is. Where can people find you?
Well, if you would like to find me online, you can go to leftoverpizzaclub.com, and you can also listen to Leftover Pizza Podcast on, I believe, all major streaming platforms right now, if you'd like. So check us out there as well.
And be sure to subscribe. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, MySpace. At Haunted Hangover. Head over to hauntedhangover.com for links to the audio-only version of this episode, the video version of this episode, our Patreon page, which has exclusive episodes of the podcast. And, as always, remember, the best cure for a hangover is
more booze.
Catch you guys later.
And remember, there are far worse things awaiting man than death.
Oh, man.
That's deep, bro.
It's real deep.